Council and discussing real estate contracts. May I have a motion to return to public session?
I move that we return to public session.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Polly, I'll second. All in favor? I'd like to stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will start with the President's report. I just have a couple of quick things to touch on. First, I have to give a huge shout out to the girls' field hockey team. It's been an amazing run to win the sectionals and the regional title. I was fortunate enough to be there on Saturday. I really don't think it was as cold as people said it was if you dressed appropriately. And I just want to wish them all the best. They will be shuffling off to Buffalo Friday morning at 6 a.m. on a big coach bus, and really, we're very proud of them heading off to the Final Four in the States. I think we'd love to cheer them on, but we know that's probably not realistic for a lot of people at 6 a.m., but we hope that everyone is going to be giving them a big shout out. We also wanted to mention that we have several swimmers going to States and a cross-country runner, and we're just very, very proud of our athletes, and we've had a really, really great fall season, so good luck to the field hockey team, and we'll keep you posted. I also want to mention that if anyone hasn't been by the gym, it looks terrific. The banners are back up on the wall, and we're looking forward to a great winter season. So if you want to go take a look at how great the gym looks, that's been terrific. I also wanted to mention a couple more things. On Tuesday the 5th, I was fortunate enough to attend on behalf of the board the first meeting of our Counseling Advisory Council, which is led by Heidi McCarthy. And this was formed to give different stakeholders an opportunity to review, discuss, make suggestions to support the implementation of our counseling program. I just want to say that this was really beneficial, and I think everyone involved really made a lot of good suggestions. We got a lot of good information, and we're going to be meeting again in January. This Friday will be the second of our 2 school facilities tours. We mentioned the first one last time, so on Friday the 15th, the board and John and Christine and we will be going to Grafflin and Bell and Greeley to get a tour of those facilities, look at our existing spaces, our new spaces, and that allows us to see how great everything is and also plan for the future. Joe Gramonta will take us around there. Also, I know that Christine will be updating everyone on her trip to China with Adam and Andrew Corsilia. And I did want to mention we are not back in session until after Thanksgiving. So it seems very early, but just wanted to send very happy Thanksgiving wishes to everyone because our next meeting isn't until December. So that's the President's report for tonight. And I can hand it off to Christine.
Okay, so I have a couple of announcements before we begin. First, this Thursday, this Chappaqua Schools Foundation will be celebrating our innovation over the course of last year, and Amanda McDonough from Bell Middle School will be honored as the Innovator of the Year, and then we'll have our other faculty members and students who received grants from CSF receive certificates, and we'll thank them for their work with our students. And it's a really nice event. It'll be occurring here at Greeley at 3:45 if anyone would like to join us. There is a process where you can announce your attendance, and the email is above, or it's on the flyer up there. So if anyone would like to attend, please let the CFF know. On November 16th, we have 2 important events in our district. This is Saturday. We have our annual craft fair at Bell. We encourage our families to go and participate. This is one of our biggest fundraisers for the district. And we also have our toy and book sale at West Orchard. So if you have some time on Saturday, please consider stopping by either event to support our community. We have we're coming up on our musical season, so the high school will be engaged in the performance of Cinderella, and that's over 3 days, and this is a family-friendly event, so I'm hoping that many of our students in the elementary school will attend with their parents, so tickets are on sale now, and then that same weekend, Roaring Brook will be performing Aladdin Jr. at Seven Bridges on Saturday. So hopefully we'll see many of you there. The December 6th, I have to go all the way into December
Right.
because our
No,
next
our
meeting
next
is the
meeting's till
11th.
the 11th.
The Scholarship Foundation is holding their annual game night, so if parents would like to participate in that and support some of our seniors who struggle paying for, or who anticipate struggling paying for college, that would be a nice event for you to attend to. It's on the 6th at 7:30 at the Crossing. I would just wanted to update the community on the strategic plan. So at our last meeting, I had shared with you that the athletic department was engaged in this process, and we had sent out a notification to the community on multiple changes in the athletic department, including the addition of our assistant athletic director since we last met, and now the strategic planning task force for athletics is preparing to send out a survey to our families across the district at all grade levels through the thought exchange program that we used for the district strategic plan to gather some information so they can hone in on their targeted work over the course of the next 5 years. So please look for that. That information should be sent out shortly, and please consider engaging in this survey process because it's invaluable to us as we begin planning for the future of athletics in our district. And I want to thank Jane for sitting on the strategic planning committee on behalf of the Board of Education. Again, Jane had mentioned our field hockey team has been really successful.
Crushing it.
We're really excited for them as they head up to Buffalo. I'm going to encourage you to follow on Twitter on Saturday to see how they're doing. I know that Adam, Andrew, and I were able to do that from China on the 2 games that we couldn't make. But again, we're really happy for them, and we hope they have tremendous success in Buffalo. But I anticipate probably at a future meeting we'll have them come, and we can honor them directly as we do when our student athletes are able to make it to this level of competition. So congratulations to Suki and his team, and we wish them well as they go up to Buffalo to compete against the very best in their field. I wanted to give you an update on our consultants. So Dr. Carolyn McGough was in the district today. As discussed at our last meeting, we sent out a notification to the entire community of her work and the scope of her work here in this district. And then yesterday I notified the parents of classified students specifically. And then today we had a session on evaluations and assessments sponsored by our PTA, and Carolyn was able to attend that meeting with Dr. Peace. So she's on site now, and she's starting to engage in her work, and I'll continue to update the board and the community as her work unfolds over the course of the next month, but we're really excited to have her here in the district. It's been a great opportunity for us and the special education program. Yesterday, we had a tremendous author visit who was able to speak with our students both at the high school and at the middle school. Jarrett is the author of Hey Kiddo, and it's actually a memoir of his life and his struggles as a child of a parent with a heroin addiction. And so I had the opportunity with Tony to see his morning presentation to the high school, and it was very moving, and our kids were really engaged, and we received the same level of feedback from the middle school. So we're really excited and grateful that we were able to have him come in and speak with our kids about his work and the social emotional learning that he engaged in over his course of his career, particularly as our students are moving through the same developmental age that he was when he wrote this book, right? So it was tremendous. On the agenda, Dr. Mazza is making a donation to the school district of a technology platform that allows him to work with his teachers and create virtual notes and other documents using a software technology. And he was actually, in his work at UPenn, was a corporation gifted him this technology, and he'd like to donate it to the district so that his faculty, he can use it with his faculty in the professional development realm. So that's on the donation schedule tonight. We thank him for this, his gifting this product to the school. And if it's something that we feel makes sense to be expanded in other buildings, we can do that. We can do that at the time. So I asked Adam if he could talk a little bit about Superintendent's Conference Day that occurred on September 4th.
November 4th. Yep.
November 4th,
Yep.
sorry,
So,
geez.
Yeah, we kicked off the day. That was the day where our elementary teachers had parent-teacher conferences, but it's a professional development day for our secondary educators. So our middle school and high school teachers were all invited up to Greeley for the morning. We had a keynote by Dr. Robert Dillon, who's the author of the book called The Space, A Guide for Educators, a terrific guide on using space in innovative ways. He's a really good fit for our district. He kicked off the morning with a keynote, and then we had an opportunity for most of the kind of mid to late morning for our secondary departments to meet. So that was important to talk about horizontal curriculum alignment across the middle schools and also vertical curriculum alignment from the middle schools to the high schools. We don't have a lot of opportunities over the course of the year to get entire departments together from both of our middle schools and our high schools. So we did that in the morning after the keynote, and then in the afternoons, the middle school teachers went back to each middle school. Greeley teachers stayed here, and they did building level work around ruler, social emotional learning, and also quite a bit of work around the STEAM centers at the middle school. We sent Robert Dillon over to Bell and also to Seven Bridges. He spent some time with all of the Bell teachers in the new STEAM space. He had actually spent time in the Seven Bridges space over the summer, so it was a good opportunity for him to get into the Bell STEAM space to work with the teachers on how they might be able to maximize that space. So that was a superintendent conference day. We happen to be in China, but special thanks to the PD team. And Josh Colwell-Block kicked off the keynote in the morning. I think he started by saying that all the adults were in China, so he was in charge of introducing the keynote speaker, but they did a great job.
So we just wanted to talk a little bit, Adam and I, about China. So as many of the members of our community may know, we have an exchange program that has existed over many years with Beijing National School. And what had happened was Beijing National School was unable to send students to our district because they were experiencing difficulty obtaining visas. So in order to reestablish our relationship and the purpose of the program, Adam, Andrew, and I traveled to China to visit Shanghai Experimental School because it is critical for this program to be successful and to accomplish the goals for students to come and visit Greeley.
Has to be
Right?
interesting.
So we visited Beijing National School because we want to maintain our relationship with that program because that school is progressive, and I believe that a lot of the work that we've done here mirrors the work that was taking place at Beijing National School previous to any of our spaces coming online, because they're really progressive with their the environment in which they teach their children. So their thinking is right along the lines of our thinking. So it was great to learn from them and what they're working on, particularly in terms of computer sciences and environmental studies. So, but what we absolutely had to do was we needed to travel to Shanghai to reestablish a new exchange program with the students at Shanghai International School, Experimental School, because they will be able to send students to our district, and we will be able to send our students to their district. And what's different about Shanghai when you compare it with Beijing is that when our students were traveling to Beijing, they were staying with middle school families. At Shanghai Experimental School, they'll be able to stay with high school families, and that's more in line with what we believe our exchange program should look like. So we spent time visiting 3 different schools, learning from them about what their core values are, what they feel are their areas of focus within their curricular program. And we talked a lot with them about professional development of teachers and how we can work together collaboratively to not only expose our students to different cultures, but different ways of learning within the context of different communities and different cultural environments. So, I mean, for us, I felt like we had a lot of takeaways. We'll have the opportunity, due to some retirements, to maybe reconfigure some of our thinking around our instructional program at Greeley, and this was really helpful for us to see, particularly how Beijing National was instructing kids, in the areas of, again, computer sciences, particularly artificial intelligence. So, Adam, did you want to add a little bit?
Yeah, there were so many takeaways. The use of space you can see up there is just amazing. It's fascinating to see some of their spaces go from indoors to outdoors. Those aren't windows. The students could actually move like freely between the indoor and outdoor spaces. Their use of plants, their use of water features created an amazing tone. So a lot of their work parallels our thinking around space, and even pushes our thinking in some ways. And then, as Christine mentioned, the elective programming was amazing throughout the arts, the performing arts, the visual arts. They had some really neat electives on automobile design, for example, that were some really neat STEAM opportunities. So we came home with a lot of really neat ideas, and it's a beautiful country. It was beautiful, clean, neat, safe spaces for our kids to visit. So came back with a lot of takeaways. It was worth the trip.
And we really appreciate the board's support of us being able to go and visit Beijing National, but particularly Shanghai, because if we're going to send students there, we want to be comfortable with that. So we all had different lenses. Like Andrew was in every moment that he could experience what the kids would be experiencing over there. He did that because he wanted to make sure that the experience that they would have on the exchange program was appropriate. And so I appreciated his desire to take the subways, to make sure that he was visiting the places the kids would go shopping, just to make sure that that was in line with what our expectations would be with how we would want our kids to be interacting over there within that community. And then, Adam had a different lens, right? His was the instructional lens in terms of how is the teaching and learning happening here, and what can we bring back to our own community to improve what we're doing in our own district. So I really feel like, even though I think it was a tremendous opportunity for us, we also know that in order for us to go, John and Tony and other members of the administrative team had to really take on some of our roles, and we really appreciate them allowing us to do this in a real seamless fashion. So we just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for that. Right? And then, that was my last slide. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is, tonight we have 3 presentations on the agenda. So I'd like to begin with Josh, because we thought that it was important. There's been some changes in regulations and how we approach cybersecurity. So I asked Josh if he could present to you tonight some of the adjustments that have been made in the regulations, and some of what we're doing as a district to be proactive in protecting our servers and our students as we engage in more technology than ever with our kids. And then Adam will do an overview of our NWA testing, which has begun this week. And then John and I will do a review of the Zouder property process and timeline as we discussed at our last meeting.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I know last week, or last few weeks ago, right, was more about instruction. Today is a topic of safety and security for our students, our faculty, our staff, and the school district. So when I started in this role, we created a vision for technology. We added last year secure and private to our infrastructure as a core piece of the work that we do in the technology department in the realm of protection. In the last 3 years, we've done a lot of work technically and with training of people to maintain this security and safety. Today, I'm going to go over our current protection in our networks and talk about how we protect our students and our staff, some plans that were always part of a 3 to 5 year plan for cybersecurity and cyber safety, and talk mostly about the New York State Ed 2D law for data privacy and the regulations that are most likely going to be passed in January, and how that is going to significantly speed up some of the plans that we had as a school district for cyber safety and cybersecurity. So as we advance the use of technology for personalized learning, for data, for our office functions, we also really do need to be worried about the safety of our students and how secure our networks are. School districts and municipal government organizations are becoming the new target of cyber attacks. As we continue to learn about more new laws and new services, we need to keep protecting. A lot of the work that we do as a district is not in isolation. We have a lot of both regional partners, as well as I've partnered with some national organizations, so that we're not just New York centric, so that we're learning about what other states are doing about cybersecurity and cyber safety, and even what other countries are doing, so that we're making sure that we're getting we have the most knowledge as possible to protect everybody. So I'm going to sort of dig myself into a cybersecurity and cyber threat hole and hopefully dig myself out of it by the end of it. So there are top cyber threats of schools are experiencing. The largest one is phishing. Phishing is where covert emails get sent to various members of the organization requesting information or requesting that you click on a link, usually requesting funds. The second most one is what's called the distributed denial of service attack, which is where an attacker would flood our network and essentially shut it down by all of the data traffic that comes at the network. A data breach is the third one, which is where someone literally is hacking into our network and stealing our data. And ransomware is when someone strategically places a file on our network, usually through a phishing attempt that then infiltrates the internal network. And then the Internet of Things vulnerabilities are things that all of us keep adding to our networks at our homes and schools, locks, cameras, anything that does something that's internet enabled becomes a threat for hackers and for safety. And these are the 5 biggest threats that come into school districts. Over the past 5 months, there have been multiple local and regional school districts that have been their data held for ransom. One school district had to delay the first day of school due to a cyber attack. We all can, and these are all very well protected school districts. So there's lots of questions of randomness of how this happens, but as a school district, we just need to be remaining as vigilant as humanly possible to thwart these attacks as best as possible and have procedures in place in case something happens. And that's really what a lot of the security measures that we have are. Actually, most school districts are envious of our firewall. And we've moved a lot from local computing to cloud computing, which is a recommendation of banks recommend doing this now because they then have 24/7 security. And if anything happens, Microsoft is immediately on it. Google is immediately on it. All of these companies have a lot more sophisticated, dedicated teams to do this. Our network monitoring, we review our third-party contracts, and we've started staff cybersecurity training. So this now brings us to the New York State Ed 2D law, which is going to summarize a lot of this, but expand on it as well. This law was passed in 2014 in response to the in Bloom New York State data system that was proposed. It has taken this long to get regulations that everybody can agree to begin to be implemented in a school district. This law, the crux of it is a district needs to protect its student personally identifiable data. So if I say PII, it's personally identifiable data, as well as faculty APPR data. Those are the 2 classifications of information that a district needs to protect under New York State Ed 2D law. So the organizations that are really part of this law are NYSID. They need to be protecting our PII. We send data to them. They have data warehouses. The school districts, us, BOCES, and any third-party contractor that has any personally identifiable information of our students or teacher APPR data. So those are the 4 groups that are mostly covered under the law. The law has 9 areas, I'll go over each one of them individually, that talk about data protection and transparency of the protections that we have in place. The timeline that we're currently on, that's currently proposed, there was a draft that was put before the Board of Regents. There was a public comment period. There's been a back and forth about certain things, and it's almost certain that this will be passed by the Board of Regents in their January 2020 meeting. From the information we have, there's only a couple of things that they're ironing out right now related to third-party contractors. And then July 1st, 2020 is when the first piece of implementation is required by Part 121 of the regulation of this law. So the first piece of it involves all of you sitting up here is by July 1st, 2020, we need to create a data security and privacy board policy as a district. That policy needs to encompass, we said there are 9 pieces of it, this is one of them, it needs to encompass the other 8 pieces of the law in it. We are waiting for New York State. NYSED has said that they will give sample policies and guidance about the policy. We haven't seen any of this yet. However, as NITEN, our Westchester School District tech directors, we've all been looking at policies and coming up with some samples of our own to propose to our school boards that encompass this so that we could get ahead of the NYSED agreement, because we don't want it to be June and they haven't given us anything yet. So we do need to start discussing this so that by that July 1st deadline, we have a policy in place. So of these next 8 other features, we need to show that we are protecting all personally identifiable information. And this means that anything that has students' names on it, parents' names on it, addresses, student numbers that are linked to any student data information. So if there's any way that a system needs to have a link to student information, then it needs to be protected both at rest and in motion. So that means that we need to, if we're transferring it to another place, such as a BOCES, we need to make sure that we have protections in place, such as suppression and blurring it, the information, to make sure that no one can get to that data. We already have the next piece, which is a parent's bill of rights. We'll have to make some minor adjustments to adhere to the new regulation that comes out. Just some highlights of that. It involves posting every contract that has personally identifiable information and a rider to those contracts on our district website. It involves getting and making sure that every contractor agrees to the parent bill of rights for data as a district. The next piece is the largest of the requirements, which is the NIST. The New York State has adopted the NIST cybersecurity framework. What that is it's a standard for technology. They're not expecting us to have the framework fully in place by July 1st, 2020. They expect us to have a plan to reasonably become in place for the NIST framework. COSIN, a national organization, has a certification for school districts, and if we go through that process, we will be NIST certified as well. So that's the process that I'm recommending that we go through, which talks about, we look at the target profile, where do we want to be as a school district? We look at the current profile, we look at the gaps, and then we go take planning of those gaps. And that really involves our firewalls, how we're responding to incidents, how are we identifying incidents, how are we detecting them. So that's all encompassed in there. The next piece is our third-party contracts. So every single third-party contract from our student information system to the contracted employee that has access to, that signs off and would have access to whatever we give them access to, needs to be in compliant with Ed Law 2D. So all of the trainings that I just described, our third-party contractors need to go through as well, and they need to sign off that they have gone through these contracts. So every contract that we write is going to have a rider, be approved by our attorneys, and then be adopted. So you're going to see lots more resolutions. You actually, I believe, have the first one on the agenda from Google that signed off that as a third-party contract to the school district that they are going to be in adherence by July 1st, 2020, to Ed Law 2D. So those are going to be every single contract we're going to need to review. We're currently looking at some programs that will sort of automatically check off the boxes to say, does this software program adhere to all of those contracts and all of the things that we need them to do. The next thing we actually mostly do, which is annual employee training. The piece that we need to add to that is about click wrap agreements, which is whenever you go to a website and you click, I agree to that, right? That's a legal document that you just agreed to. And so even free sites, things that faculty would use, we need to vet and make sure that it adheres to that. So that's part of the training that we need to do. And then we are putting in place complaint procedures. So clear procedures if someone believes that we have some sort of breach of data or that we have some sort of, that we've disclosed data that is not in accordance with the regulation. And then we need to put in an incident reporting and notification. So that's if we do have any sort of cybersecurity incident, if data is taken from a third party, we've seen this happen, right? This is in the news. We're required as a school district to report that and report what data has been exposed and where it's been exposed to. So we have to have procedures and reporting and notifications in place. And the last piece, which we've already done, is adopt a data protection officer, which is someone that oversees all of this, and then builds the team to do this work. So this is going to be a team effort. It's going to be a shift and almost an acceleration in a lot of the things that we've already put in place. And I say it's going to involve these 5 areas, which is personnel, policies, processes, our systems, and the services we use to build this culture of safety with the work that we're doing, along with advancing our innovation, along with our harnessing the power of that digital world. So that is the overview of cybersecurity and cyber safety and Ed Law 2D.
You just took a really complicated issue, Josh, and made it very simple to understand. Thank you for that.
I'd just like to make a comment. I attended the New York State School Boards Association convention along with Holly, Christine, and Tony were there. And there were many informative seminars there, and I attended a law conference prior to the actual meeting. And this was part of that seminar. And it was very complex, and I was very concerned about bringing all this information back to the district until I spoke to someone who said, well, they consulted with Josh before giving this presentation. So I just want to say we are in really, really good hands here. And this was very thorough, and I really appreciate all the work you've done, which is really ahead of where everyone is at this point. So thank you.
We're extremely
Very
fortunate.
much.
We really are. And
Yeah, I don't think people
we see
realize
it here, and
that.
I don't know if the community sees it. They see it in
Right,
little,
it's hard to
in
understand.
small pieces
Yeah.
when you do presentations, but we're incredibly fortunate to have Josh here, and it's a lot of manpower and a lot of work and a lot of information that you somehow all make it seem like it's all easy to explain and it's all doable, and it's very much appreciated, and it really, what you do for the district it can't be measured. It's incredible. So thank you.
Thank you. And it's a
Thank you
team
for
effort,
keeping
right?
us. Yeah, no, thank you for keeping us as safe as we could possibly be.
I've got actually a question, and I mean, I absolutely agree. Thank you for making a phrase that I was a little bit afraid of understandable. So now I have a question because now I understand a little. Actually, I have 3 questions. How many third-party contractors or contracts do you think we're going to have impacted? Like, how many resolutions are we going to see?
You're going to see a lot, because it's not just, it's going to be, so I guess, okay, there's a few. So one thing that we're trying to do is limit the number of contracts by, if we purchase through our Lyric or a BOCES, because then that takes it. So we're working on that to do a limit. But every single software product that we use is going to have to be signed off on. And it's likely that every single third-party contractor, we're going to have to look. Like, so things that you probably don't even realize, like the company that provides the ID badges has a server that they own that has our student names and student numbers in it. They're going to have to sign off that they are EdLaw 2D compliant, right? So it's, hopefully we'll start to bundle them together, but there's going to be a significant number as we start to renew each contract. Each contract is going to have that rider.
And how much of a challenge is that with national outlets or outfits that aren't focused on New York State?
It's a little challenging. We've seen most of them sign off on it, and Uri One BOCES has a whole team that works on contracts. And they're the ones that got Google to sign off on it. They're the ones that are working with other companies to do it. So we have those resources, but there's going to be a little bit of legwork with some contracts.
And then my last question is, how does this impact the students that we're issuing the one-to-one devices to, or does it not?
It doesn't all. Microsoft has already, I was actually just with Microsoft today. They have fully signed off on everything. And the only software on those devices is from Microsoft. There are services such as Canvas that has already signed off on it, and other products that we use that are web-based. But generally, the devices that we purchased, which was on purpose in preparing for this, are made by Microsoft. Microsoft has signed off on it, so we have no impact.
Thank you.
But can someone add software to it?
Only we have that ability to do that of software that is approved by
So
us.
someone can't go in and break into this thing?
No.
I have some other questions, but not for open discussion.
So the policy committee will be meeting.
November
Yeah.
21st.
I was concerned about that. I mean, I don't know to what extent we can rely on NICEAD, because they're looking for a new commissioner, and now their interim commissioner has stepped down. So now they have a new interim commissioner.
For the interim.
For the interim, so I don't know why.
Right.
I don't know if that has anything to do with
So
all the delays there. So I wonder if NISBA has stepped in and is maybe doing
Do you have a framework
sample
already, Josh?
policies, but
So what we would do is we'll wait until the regions pass regulations, and then we'll meet with our attorney and review our policy to make sure
Right.
it adheres to regulations.
But thank you for being so preemptive, and you
Yeah,
said that
Josh.
you're sort of
Great.
taking the lead ahead of time, so.
Thank you, Josh. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much, Josh.
So now we're going to transition to our MAP testing. So Adam will be presenting our universal screener.
It works, and it works, good. Good, so we are in the throes of implementing our new universal screener. Today was the second day of testing. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. NWEA stands for the Northwest Evaluation Association, and MAP stands for the Measure of Academic Progress, just so you've heard. I don't know that those specifics are
Right.
important, but I know that there's this alphabet soup out there in education, so just so you've heard what those are. So In terms of how I structured this is just like a little table of contents in terms of what we're going to go over. I'll give you a little bit of the background, history, and context. What is a universal screener? Because it's fairly new for our district. Talk to you about the selection process that we went through in the spring, and then give you a little summary of what NWEA, what that MAP test entails and why we chose it. So just in terms of the history and the context, this is just a reminder of our district's strategic priorities, and this really fits underneath a couple of the categories. One of them is this district-wide assessment practices. We had heard through the strategic planning process of a little over a year ago now that teachers were really looking for more specific data on student performance. Parents wanted more information on how their students were progressing over time, and administrators needed more information about to inform the intervention process and be able to make sure that students were progressing appropriately as we get into state assessments and things like that. So we just needed a little bit more data at a more granular level. And we also were looking for data so we could start to personalize learning a little bit more in that last strategic priority about using technology to personalize learning, with the idea being that all students don't learn the same thing at the same time in the same way. And by having good data on what students know and can do, we can tailor instruction to be a little bit more specific for them. So why look at universal screeners? Universal screeners is kind of this big category, and there are lots of products out there that are nationally normed that are considered universal screeners. But in general, the use of universal screeners in school districts is very common best practice across the country. It's really a core component of response to intervention in AIS in terms of identifying students that are in need of some additional support. Helps us monitor growth of students over time. It serves as an early warning system for students that are not growing. You don't have to wait for a big assessment like the state assessment to be able to see that. They're typically nationally normed, so you have big sets of data to compare students to in terms of what the normed growth rate would be. Very predictive now of state assessment results. So as we give screeners now, we'll have a good sense of how students are predicted to do, and we can intervene earlier for students that might need some extra support. Gives us actionable data that we can use to target instruction to specific students, and we do believe it'll help inform the special education supports and process through the CSE and otherwise. So in terms of the what, just a background of what is a universal screener. Typically, universal screeners are given 3 times a year, and they are most often computer-based, short answer, kind of dipstick assessments. And they vary in length and they vary in number of sessions, but typically it's like a one testing block 3 times a year, and they're typically given in math and in ELA, and the screener that we chose is like that. So in terms of the selection process, last year we put together a committee of stakeholders from the internal stakeholders. We had teachers from each elementary school, both middle schools. We had math teachers, ELA teachers. We had interventionists, administrators, representatives from our special education department, special education teachers, as well as administrators and professional developers. And we basically started to research our options out there. After we identified why this was important to us, research our options, learn from the region, survey the region in terms of who was using what and how satisfied they were with the screeners they were using, put together that task force, developed some criteria for what we were looking for, eventually selected a program that we thought was the best fit for us, developed a rollout plan, and now we're in the process of rolling it out with students. So in terms of an overview of what the MAP test is all about, the MAP test basically gives us a sense of how students are progressing in both ELA and math over time. And we are assessing students in grades 3 through grade 8 in both of those subject areas. So you can think of it almost like when you go to bring your child to the pediatrician and they give you that height growth curve and they give you kind of the expected range, and then they track over time, and each time you go they measure the student progress and they can tell you, how they're growing compared to what they expect that growth rate to be. Now, I mentioned before that this is typically given 3 times a year, and that's what we're going to do. There's going to be a fall administration, a winter administration, and a spring administration. We've been told that the assessment takes about 45 minutes. We found already, because this is our second day, that in some cases it takes up to an hour, and we have some students that have gone over the 45-minute time block, but the estimate is about 45 minutes. The classroom teacher acts as a proctor. It's all done electronically, so both the iPads at the elementary as well as the Surface devices at the middle school can be used. The browser gets locked down. It comes with its own browser, so the students open up the browser. It's like a little icon. They open that up. The rest of the features get disabled, so they can't surf the web and use other resources. And then the teacher can monitor the class's progress through their device. And it's a pretty smart assessment. It'll actually give the students a message to slow down if they're just clicking and selecting answers. It'll alert the teacher if a student has stopped making progress or if a student's making progress too quickly because they're kind of randomly selecting answers. So it's a pretty smart assessment in that way. It's also good practice. The state assessments are moving to electronic online assessments very soon. This year, I believe, might be the last year that they allow us to do a paper assessment for the state assessment. So giving our students the opportunity to practice an electronic assessment, kind of an online assessment, is a good thing. It can be given in English and Spanish, and it has some accessibility features for a student with a disability, for example. It can read the text to the student, so it has some accessibility options built into it. One of the neat things about the MAP test is that it dynamically adjusts the questions based on the student's answers. So the goal of the assessment is to identify what the student knows and what they don't know. And so if a student answers a question correctly, it'll give them a more challenging question. Answer it correctly again, it'll give them a more challenging question. Answer it incorrectly, and it'll give a less challenging question. So that was a new experience for our students, because our students do generally really well on the assessments that they're given, and they're used to answering a lot of questions correctly, but the questions just get harder and harder as they answer them correctly, because they're trying to find that top range of the student. And on the other hand, if a student is not answering them correctly, as they start them at the grade level, then it'll find the appropriate level of challenge for that student, so it can identify what they know and what they can do. So that was one of the things that was attractive to us about this particular assessment. It will produce this platform will produce reports for the teachers, the administrators, and also the parents. And we will be releasing those parent reports after the second administration. So after the winter administration, we're going to be releasing those reports to parents, so the parents can see how their students are progressing. We thought it was important to give teachers an opportunity to really digest some of that data first, and also to have 2 data points, a fall administration and a winter administration, so the growth rate will make sense to parents when they see that winter report. We think it'll be really helpful to both our educators internally and also our parents in terms of mapping student progress. A little bit about implementation, and I mentioned that we had a superintendent conference day on October 15th where we did professional development for our classroom teachers on how to administer it, and we did an extra session for what we called our super users, so users in the organization that we feel like would be the turnkey data users. We gave them an afternoon professional development. They had the morning of how to administer the assessment, but then the afternoon was about how to extract the data and read the data and start to use the data to inform instruction. So we have some experts in the PD team and also in the buildings to be able to facilitate those conversations with classroom teachers moving forward. And we plan to, for our March Superintendent Conference Day, plan to train our classroom teachers with regard to really how to use that data to personalize instruction. So as I mentioned, we started implementation yesterday. We piloted the math and the ELA in every in all of our schools. So we did math and ELA in each elementary school and also in the middle school, just to give it a test run and to make sure we had some capacity in the teachers so we could learn from any little glitches that we had. It went overwhelmingly smoothly over the last 2 days. So we're going to roll it out larger scale next week and the week after. So all of our kids in grades 3 through 8 over the next 3 weeks will be tested in both math and ELA. And that's the presentation. We think it's really going to kind of lift the level in terms of us knowing specifically what our kids know and can do and be able to personalize that instruction. That's the goal. So
It's also, as a parent who received a report like this when my kids went to the other districts, really helpful in having some context around how your child's performing and their performance over the course of the year, rather than just waiting for the end of the year benchmark from state ed.
Right, and
It's
then
very
you get that the following year. You would
Right.
normally get that. So now, how is this going to be pushed out generally to the parents?
So after the second administration, they'll receive written notification of student performance. But once everyone is used to the system, we'll be able to push it out after each assessment. The
And this
problem
will
with,
take the place of...
doesn't take the place, it's an add-on.
Will it?
Yeah.
So it's not going to change, still, they're still going to have that other testing, but this is just going to give them more information throughout the year. Right.
Right, and you know what else?
So
It
we
will
still have the other
it'll
stuff in
help us
April.
tremendously with RTI,
Yeah.
because we'll have another data point to make decisions with families around services. It'll help us with our special education students. And it'll help us with our families that feel like their kids are advanced. Because if they are, it'll show that in the assessment, because it adjusts based on scores. So it's going to give us a lot of good information to to make instructional decisions that are differentiated for our students. I'm really excited about it because I've seen it change instruction in my previous district, so I'm happy that Adam was able to lead a process that selected this instrument because I know how powerful it is. Just as time moves forward, we'll be able to show that to you as students progress through the assessment. The other thing that this will do is it'll address the concerns that our teachers had about communication regarding student progress as they move vertically through the system, because all of the data will be online and they'll be able to access it as new students come in. So not only will it address the parents' concerns that they weren't receiving enough information from us regarding progress, but it'll also address the teachers' concerns about vertical progression and transition from grade level to grade level. So we're really excited about it, but we're in the stages of implementation, so we'll be able to show you in the future how we're using it with real-time data.
If I could also mention, it's important to know that it's a low stakes assessment, right? It doesn't end up on report cards or transcripts or anything like that. It's 100% like for learning, so we can learn about what the students know and can do. And the feedback for the teachers is almost immediate, which is very different than like a state assessment. State assessment questions are designed to pile multiple skills within the same question, so it's very hard when a student gets a question wrong to identify what is it that they didn't know, because it'll have 2 or 3 skills embedded in the same question, and we won't get that feedback for months in terms of the student results. So there's very little you can do at that point to go back and remediate, as opposed to an assessment like this, which is a very low stakes assessment. The teacher gets feedback nearly immediately and gets reports that they can use, and they can intervene then and group students and remediate right there if they need to, or enrich right there on the spot.
I know it's new, but how have you found, like in other districts, like the kids respond? Do they feel like it's like an easy thing to take and it's,
I think that
What's their
once
feedback?
it's
I'm
embedded,
curious.
because it's not time intensive, it's
Okay.
one period for each, 3 times a year.
Right.
I think they see it as a tool to help them with their learning.
Okay.
So, for example, when my children and I would go over the reports, they would be able to see their progress over time. And I think that was helpful for them to see improvement over the course of the school year. So it was more meaningful than a 3 or a 4 or a 2 or a 1
Right.
on a state ed assessment. It was something that they worked for. The other thing it does is it can break skills out into specific areas, and teachers can use that to form
Strengthen
strategy
certain
groups
areas, right.
for kids with similar skill level work that needs to be done. So it helps, it helps give language around that work with our kids. So it's a great tool. It's a great tool for us.
I have a question. You said it was normed by over 10 million students, and I'm just curious, do we have any information about the geographic distribution of that? Is it?
Yeah, I know it's used in all 50 states. It's actually used in 49 countries, believe it or not. They said they had like 4.5 million students take the assessment. So they've got a tremendous data set, I think, is what's important to us, so that we get a really good sense of how our students are performing compared to these large groups of students. So that's where they get their kind of normed growth curves that they use to compare students to.
But it's also benchmarked against the New York State standards. So it gives us a predictive score on the state assessments. So while it has global implications and a global measure, it also has a state measure too that's really helpful for us as we prepare kids for those assessments.
Yeah, something that we hadn't had before, right? Within a week or two, we're going to know which students could be in trouble of scoring a 1 or a 2 on the state assessment.
Right, it's
Months ahead of
completely
time, right? So we
different.
can.
I mean, it really
Right.
aids the student's instruction.
Yes.
As opposed to
So,
I'm sorry.
a state set of data.
And when we did an analysis of correlation, it was almost spot on every time. The predictive ability was really accurate of the spring administration to the performance on the New York State assessment.
Okay.
Go ahead, Warren, I'm
so
sorry.
we're using this as a diagnostic tool, which is a better use of testing than just for testing for state purposes.
Yes, of course,
Perfect.
right.
I'm trying to envision when you said it's done by the classroom teachers. Or is an entire room of students doing this at the same time, or is it staggered in any way?
Yeah, the way it's set up right now, we've scheduled it so that the teachers are doing it with the students all at the same time within the class. And we're doing that so we can push in some professional development support and also some technology support. So we'll have like 3 adults. But for the last couple of days, we've had like 3 adults in the room while the students were taking it. And what we've learned from districts that have used it for a while is that the teachers are more flexible about, one group of students taking it while they're doing maybe a strategy group with another group of students, and you can pause the assessment in the middle, so you can do 20 minutes of it one day, maybe do a little bit of teaching and other work, and then pick it up the next day and do another 20 minutes. So what we've learned from school districts that have implemented it and used it for a while is that they're much more creative about the way they administer it and work it into kind of the flow of instruction. But for right now, we're doing it in a much more traditional way, just so we can provide the support for the teachers.
But what it comes down to is that it ends up being a local decision. There's not
Right.
a
That's
particular
right.
way you need to do it to adhere.
That's
Okay,
right.
Great.
Yep. Yeah, the only requirements in terms of the statistics of it is they said give it within a certain, I think it was a 2-week window. Don't start it and then let it go longer than 2 weeks, because you lose that statistical significance of the data you're collecting over time.
I also want to add that we are required to have a screener. So we are now meeting the regulation that New York State has given us to make sure that we're screening all of our students to see if they need support. So this is, in terms of compliance, we're complying with the regulations, but we're also
Great
having
diagnostic tool.
we're able to benefit from that compliance, so. Okay,
All right.
all right, thank you. So,
Great, thank you, Adam.
can I have that? All right, so we'll pull up the Zadar property presentation. So John and I we'll do this together. So last meeting, we had some preliminary discussion about the Zadar property. So we thought it would be helpful if we just went through the timeline of how we got to the point where we are advertising for the property to be sold into subdivisions. And then we can have a discussion after we present all the information to the board. Okay? All right, so first we have 3 district properties. So John, did you want to explain which 3 properties we're talking about in terms of that could be potential for sale?
Could we adjust the light for this one?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So the 3 district properties we're talking about, they are at Seven Bridges, West Orchard, and the Zalder property. So if you look at the Seven Bridges, potentially there could be 3 potential lots.
Do you need the laser pointer? Yeah, if you can laser point on there.
Oh,
Okay.
there we go.
So this is the West Orchard.
Okay, there you go.
And this is the school, and we have a very large tract of land here. And then it has its own exit point, there's a road there. So we were looking at this piece as a potential piece of property that we can sell off, because we're not using that piece. Because this is the school, and then we have the field right here, and then the playground is right there. So this is West Orchard. And this is Seven Bridges. And the Seven Bridges, the field is here. So we have the land, and this is Hog Hill Road back here. So we have land here. So what? So the next slide will show is Zalder property. So in 2016, we contracted an engineering firm to look at these 2 properties. So, and they have given us some proposals. So potentially, Seven Bridges can have 3 lots, and then West Orchard can have 4 lots. And this is the property that we are actively working on to subdivide. And so this is Gary Drive. And Seven Bridges School is down there somewhere, this way. And then so this is Gary Drive, and this is Sabina Road. There's a road you can go in there. And then here is Button Hook Road. So, and this is Gary Drive. So our property is back here. And starting in 2010, we started having a conversation about this, and so now.
Okay. So I just want to go through the history. So in 1973, the board put a bond referendum to the community to purchase the property. And then it was approved, so then the board passed a resolution to issue the bond to acquire the land, and then in November 26th, we bought the land for from Jacob Zotter. That's where the name came from. So the purpose initially in the records, and this was a long time ago, is that it's our understanding that the reason the property was purchased because the board had the thought that eventually we'd need to expand the district. And so there was 20.36 acres that were purchased from Zotter. And then as we have gone through the process with Newcastle, I just don't want to misrepresent this. So while there's 20 acres there, 8 acres have been set aside for preservation. So we're really looking at about 12 acres that we're selling. And then, of course, there's some other environmental considerations that we have to do in compliance with the approval process. So this purchase happened in the 70s, and then in the 2000s, there was an expansion study done, and there was a site selected to build 7 bridges that was not the Zotter property. So then the discussion started to happen around the board table is, okay, so what are we going to do with this? So then in July 7th, 2010, the Board of Education authorized the exploration of selling the property. So later that year in September, an engineering firm was appointed to do an analysis of this property, and then that same month, all the neighbors were contacted in writing that border the property to let them know that this was happening, and we have those documents on file. And then over the course of the next 5 years, there was interactions with the planning board to go through the process of putting this property up for sale. And during that time, the board decided to switch engineers for all kinds of reasons. And J.D. Barrett was the engineering consultant appointed by the board who really pushed this process through the town of Newcastle over the course of the following 4 years, because the approval process was very long. So between 2015 and 19, the district and the engineer appeared before the planning board multiple times to submit documents and to answer questions. And then that ultimately wound up in there being a public hearing on these 2 dates, the December 4th date and the March 5th date. And then in March of this year, the planning board approved the property to be sold preliminary as a subdivision of 6 units. So when that happened, we went through the process of appointing a real estate broker. So we did an RFP, and we had 6 firms apply, and the board interviewed those firms and then selected Sotheby's, which was appointed on August 7th. And then we went through a process with our real estate agent, which resulted in us developing the listing price and approving that listing price in October of this year. So just in terms of communication, I just wanted to articulate for you, and a lot of this happened before I got here, but John was a part of all of this. There's been multiple meetings held with the neighbors. There's been at least 5 mailings that went out regarding the sale of this property. And we did a search of the Zotter property in our board minutes, and we got at least 33 results of this either being mentioned in the minutes or in the actual agenda for discussion over the course of between 2010 to date. So then some of the commentary that we've been hearing is this $7 million figure. So I wanted John to talk a little bit about where we think this came from. So John, can you share your thoughts about that?
Yes. So what we did was that when we have a very general estimates because we talked to the former tax assessor of the town of Newcastle, and he gave us some general idea of what the property value was. And we looked at 3 properties. We looked at the 3 we mentioned, the West Orchard, 7 Bridges, and also the Zotter property. And the potential sale value of all these properties combined, we're estimating at $7 million. Remember, this number was put together in 2016 when we were floating the bond. And the reason we wanted to come forward with that number at that time was because we want to present a tax-neutral bond. What that means is that to pay off the $42.5 million bond, there will be no tax levy increase. And when we look at all the factors, and I just mentioned the factors. It was, for the interfund transfer, we reduced $475,000 a year. And then also we have building aid from the state, and we were short $7 million. So we thought that, we will be able to get $7 million for the sale of these properties. And if you look at our documents, our last slides, not next to the last slides, you will see, at this slide, you will actually see this is part of the newsletters that we send, and then also we also have flyers. You will see that we talked about properties. Can you do the? So the word we use is always properties. It's never a single property, and and also at the time when we were talking about it is that obviously we don't know what this will call for. The three properties, and we don't know the timing. So we also made a commitment that whatever is a shortfall, we'll use the fund balance to make up to that, and we'll make sure that it's going to be tax levy neutral for the taxpayers.
All right, so in terms of the purpose of the sale, so John talked about how this process was discussed during the capital project to offset the costs associated with the $42.5 million bond. And then we also know if we subdivide the property and we have more homes on the property, we'll be able to hopefully gain more revenue through taxes. So we anticipate 6 new homes valued at $2 million each would add an additional $250,000 a year to the budget. So all of that thinking went into the process of why we've listed the properties in the way that we have. Now, with that said, we have a realtor. If people are interested in purchasing the property, we have an agent acting on our behalf. They need to contact the agent and have that discussion with the agent. And if the agent feels like they have a reasonable offer, they'll bring that forward to the Board of Education. But the way that we have the property listed is in the best interest of the district based on the revenue that we would be able to receive from the homes that would be on that property if they're valued at $2 million each, based on the subdivision process that we've went through with the town planning board. So that's how we got to this place today. Now, nowhere in the record did we see anything or any indication that anyone at any time said the daughter property was valued at $7 million. That would be completely inappropriate. That is a process that you need to go through, which we have gone through once the town board approved the subdivision. And to make a premature statement like that is not indicated anywhere in the record. So I'm not really sure where that confusion exists. And it's, coming into this situation based on what we've laid out to you, that's my best guess as to why people are confused as to why the property is listed one way when they perceived it to be listed as another way. Again, I'd like to reiterate, if people are interested in exploring whether or not they would like to purchase the property, they should contact the realtor. Because it would be inappropriate for anyone on behalf of the district to engage in any kind of conversation about this property, which is why we have an agent. So that's my thoughts on where we are in terms of the sale. So I didn't know if the board had any questions that we could do our best to answer, given the fact that some of us weren't even here at the inception of this idea. So.
I think you did a very comprehensive review. Thank you. One thing I did hear was initially when the property was purchased, they were thinking about putting a 4th elementary school in and adjusting for the middle school. The middle school, they put the 2nd middle school in, so they needed the property for the other elementary school. So that was part of the, hearsay, but that was part of the discussion I had always heard.
No, it's just a helpful background for some of us who were not on the board, and we remember some of the discussions when they were building 7 bridges, that there were properties owned throughout the district, but, and there were decisions being made as to where to site various schools. So I was aware of the properties, but did not know the full history of all of them, so thank you.
So again, I would encourage, if people have questions about the property or they're interested in the property, they contact a realtor, and if they need a realtor's information, they can contact John and we'll provide that for them. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. We are moving on to the public comment period.
Committee report.
What? Oh, I jumped over the committee reports. Let's go back to that. My apologies. Communications, we have not had a meeting since the last one, so I don't think we have anything in particular to report. So,
We have a policy committee meeting scheduled for this Friday.
No, next,
21st.
21st, next
Oh,
Friday.
I'm sorry. Yeah, next Friday. I guess we should say the time is at 1 o'clock.
No, hold
Hold
on.
on.
10:30.
It changed,
that
so
was
I guess
rescheduled.
should
I
go
know,
by memory.
that was
Yeah.
rescheduled.
Okay.
Do we want,
The policy committee is on Thursday, the 21st at
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Facilities or anything else that can be discussed
We
later?
continue meeting, talking about what's going on in the schools, with our building. We've been looking at different environmental things like solar. I know Joe Gramundo is still working with the geothermal companies, trying to understand if that's a valid solution for us to work on. That's about it.
Anything else? Committees? Okay. Now we move on to public comment.
should we turn the light back on? So we can hear?
Yes.
Sure, we can do that. As you all know, you're welcome to make any public comments. To be respectful of each other's time, we do ask that everyone limit their comments to 3 minutes. You can always contact us via phone or email, and board members have the decision to discuss anything amongst themselves regarding comments made during the public comment period. So just, if you could state your name, thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Connors. I appreciate the time, and I just want to go over some of the points. I appreciate the presentation that was done, and I saw all the dates and the materials that were presented. I agree that there were all these meetings, which I attended the majority of them, and so I was up to speed, and there was transparency about that fact that the property was going for sale. Where the disconnect is, and I don't want to go through all the points that we can go over in detail, I can support them, and even I think some of my legal concerns regarding the process, but there were specific representations made by board members during those meetings that did point to the value of the property being about $7 million, $6 or $7 million, and representations that stood also behind board members owning a real estate company or board member. I don't want to get into the details. I can provide it, but there were specific things that were said that were persuading us and discouraging us from going through alternatives to either buy the property ourselves, have a land trust that we were in contact with, and other various ways to try and find a mutually beneficial result for the community. And so that was the avenue we were on. We were told that this plan to go to a developer with just the economic benefits were far greater, and then that's where the disconnect came in all along in all the meetings that were up there, and even seeing the board members of the planning board. Nothing was ever changed or discussed with us that came off any of those points. They were said to us over and over again, and also the legal representations that they made, and I just feel that the way it was represented to us all along about the value of the property and discouraging us to the alternatives is where I end up having the issue. And if any of you want to discuss my points specifically and the statements I made about conflict of interest and so forth, I'm happy to provide that, but I only have 3 minutes here. So, but I would appreciate, just as a community member, that you all just at least have some empathy and understand why there's concern of having this sale. It helps for the bond. I know that $7 million was a plug number for the bond, it sounds like, but the fact is it goes against public policy and the comprehensive plan for town of Newcastle. And I think there are alternatives that can be pursued to keep the open space just as in the way the community wants and likes. So I hope you take light to that and are open to it and would give some sort of concessions to that opportunity to at least go back and have that done. And if we can do a 1-year standstill period or something to work together so we can get something to find a way, I would appreciate that. All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hi, I'm Victoria Alzapidi. Thank you for addressing this tonight. So I'm really here just to kind of in a friendly way share with you that since the property was put on the market, there has been kind of an outpouring of interest in determining whether we could create a land trust and preserve the property in the interest of really everyone. It's a beautiful property, 21 acres, as you know, and it's just so wild. I mean, they're real. We just went to see it with the folks at Sotheby's a few days ago, and it actually totally surpassed my expectations. We thought it would be beautiful and untouched and wonderful, but walking in there, I mean, you know, has anyone been there yet? I'm just curious. It's worth checking it out just so that you know what the property looks like. It actually feels like a bird sanctuary, and I've gone to every sanctuary in town over the years, and I've never heard or seen so many birds. It was striking. But at any rate, the feeling is if we can preserve it for the habitat value, for the birds and the wildlife that live there, and also on a climate change level, that, you know, it's really a carbon sink, if you're familiar with that term, that would really, a lot of carbon sequestration and for the air and for the water. I think that, you know, it does connect the waterways underneath to the reservoirs through Gedney. So it just, you know, in terms of clean water, clean air for everyone in our community. We're really trying to see if we can quickly raise the funds. And the Westchester Land Trust, we reached out to them recently, and they're really interested and supportive. So this is just like literally within the last week, a Facebook effort, and it's been really fascinating to see how many people are supportive. So we're very quickly trying to figure out how to do a fundraising plan and to raise as much money as we can. And you know, we feel like we're kind of in a race now, so that we can put an offer out there first before it gets sold. So we kind of just wanted to let you know that we are kind of in the game and really hoping that we can do this quickly. And I guess to that end, I'm just curious if there's any timeline by which you need to sell the property. I know, you know, on a fiduciary duty level with the bond, et cetera, is there any date by which you really need to make sure that you have raised the funds for budget reasons?
So during the
Yeah,
comment
public
period,
comment.
we don't do a Q&A,
Okay.
but
so-
we'll come back around to it after
Okay.
it's over.
Oh, excellent. And actually connected to that, who is the right person if we want to reach out to someone who on this issue? Should we reach out to the two of you, to John and the superintendent as well? Or who do you think is the best contact?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, if you could let me know that would be great. And then also, for your consideration, I was thinking, because we are racing against time, and we don't know when someone's going to make an offer to you, we were hoping that there might be some way that, let's say a buyer comes to the table and makes you an offer. Is there any way that as a courtesy you could let us know? In other words, it might make people thinking about making it, contributing to the land trust, make a faster contribution. And so if we could kind of, you know, otherwise we may never know if there's an offer on the table, and so we may learn after the fact that it was already sold. So we just want to have the best chance competitively to buy the property if possible. So those are just what we wanted to put out there, so thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hello. Can you hear me okay? Hi, I'm Amy Ferguson. I'm a resident of Mount Kisco, and I am a member of the Board of Directors for the Westchester Land Trust. Clearly, we're here to talk about the Zatara property. I would like to express the Westchester Land Trust's interest in the proposed sale of the 21-acre parcel at the intersection of Button Hook Road and Gary Drive in the town of Newcastle, which you guys have already talked about this evening. In prior correspondence with several community members, the Westchester Land Trust has indicated its potential interest in working with the community to explore land protection options for part or all of this property. The Westchester Land Trust is the regional land conservation organization in this county. Our mission is to work with public and private landowners to preserve open space for public benefit, as well as to protect the natural resources of the communities in this county. We have protected permanently more than 8,500 acres of land since our founding in 1988. We are currently protecting more than 80 acres of land in Newcastle alone. We are based in Bedford Hills, and we have a professional staff of 10. Our staff performed a preliminary site visit to land on Monday, November 11th, and while our team has not had the opportunity to conduct a thorough site assessment and inventory of the land's conservation values, we do feel comfortable expressing our interest in working with the community to explore land protection options. I encourage you to learn more about the Westchester Land Trust by visiting our website, by visiting our headquarters in Bedford Hills, by calling our president, Lori Ensinger, or by calling our vice president, Kara Whelan. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, so there were 3 questions.
Yes.
So I think we can address a few of them, but not all of them.
Yes.
Have
All
we
right,
shut
so-
down public comment?
What?
Have we closed public comment now?
Yeah, we're done with public comment,
We're
right?
done with public
Did we
comment.
ask if there's anyone?
Yeah, it doesn't seem
Okay.
like there's anyone else.
Okay, all right, so the 3 questions that were asked, is there an approved timeline? So we haven't defined a timeline, but we are interested in selling the property as quickly as we possibly can. And if we receive an offer, that will occur in executive session, because it's a contract. But if we act on an offer, that will be done publicly. So whether or not we'd be able to let a person or people in the community know that we've received an offer, that wouldn't be an appropriate process for us, but all of our actions would take place publicly. So that's how it works in terms of how the board would approve the sale of the property. The right person to have a discussion with regarding the property is our
It's a
realtor.
We've entered into a contract with the realtor, so at this
Right.
point, the realtor
So
is
if
the appropriate party to contact.
If someone needs the contact information for our realtor, they could email John, and he will share that with whoever the interested party is. Okay, and then if necessary, we can, if there's additional information that people need regarding process, they can certainly reach out to John or I, but again, it is highly likely we will refer them to the realtor.
And just to reiterate what Christine said, that, now that we have entered into a contract to sell this real property, that is the appropriate person to contact. And in terms of, as some of you may or may not know, that subject, one of the things that we talk about confidentially in executive session are real estate contracts. And so it is not an appropriate topic of conversation for us to have in public. However, if an offer is brought to us and we discuss it in executive session, then we will act publicly on it. So I'm hoping that will explain to everyone how the process works. Okay. Okay. Moving on to item 3, approvals and ratifications. Can I have a motion? I'd like to take these together if possible, 3.1 and 3.2. These are to approve the minutes of the October 29th, 2019 special board meeting and the October 30th, 2019 board meeting. Can I have a motion for 3.1 and 3.2?
I move we accept the minutes for October 29th and October 30th.
Can I have a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I recommend 4.1 instructional as presented.
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for 4.1.
I will second 4.1. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I recommend 4.2 non-instructional as presented.
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for item 4.2, non-instructional.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to item 5, recommended action other. As we've discussed previously, we have moved on to a consent agenda, which allows us to make more effective use of our time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters. We do allow items to be pulled off the consent agenda should a board member wish to discuss them, and we can vote on those separately. Otherwise, all the items listed in item 5.1 through tonight, that is 5.7, are part of tonight's consent agenda. So I would like a motion to recommend that the Board of Education approve items 5.1 through 5.7 pursuant to a consent agenda as submitted by the Superintendent of Schools. Do I have a motion for that?
I will move all the items in our consent agenda.
I second.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
President.
Oh, okay. I would just like to, in particular, once again, thank Principal Joe Mazza of Seven Bridges for his very, very generous gift of the ideation system. So I'm hoping good things will come of that, but I just want to thank him.
Okay. Warren, you had a question?
That was my one thing, but the second thing on 5.7, I assume this is what Josh was talking about with Ed Watson.
Yes.
Yes.
This is an important contract for us. We do a lot of our work on Google.
Yep.
I had one question regarding 5.6, which is the bid, and I know that we had 2 bids, and we have asked to reject the bids, but we talked about one specifically. Was there a second one? I don't know if I'm missing something in 5.6.
Well,
So I was wondering if you could just explain that a
Sure,
little
of
bit to
course.
me.
So what happened is that we have the bid, and we have 2 bids came in.
Right.
And one is higher than the other.
Right.
So when we look at the lowest one, the firm was not able to provide all the required information.
Right, but
We
then-
gave them
but-
time, so they didn't provide it. And so if you look at the second one, is much higher.
Okay, that was my question, because I was a
So-
little confused
so-
about not going to the
Right.
second one and what the
So right now, we're
differential was.
looking into some other opportunities.
That makes sense to me now.
Probably we'll look for some state contract or some co-op
Okay.
that we can buy this service.
I couldn't tell what the differential was with that and why the second one was rejected, so that answers my question. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor of our consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Facilities?
Nothing else?
Nothing under there?
No change orders.
No change orders, that to acknowledge. Item number 7, financials. I'd like to take both of these together, 7.1 and 7.2. This is the revenue status report as of October 30th, 2019, and the appropriation status report as of October 31st, 2019. Can I have a motion for 7.1 and 7.2?
I move 7.1 and 7.2.
Second?
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Notice of future meetings. As we said before, our next meeting will take place post-Thanksgiving on Wednesday, December 11th at 7:30 p.m. here in the Academic Commons, and our following meeting after that will be Wednesday, January 8th at 7:30 p.m. where we will have a budget preview.
May I mention something?
Mhm.
At the meeting on December 11th, Andrew Crasilia will be talking about the new grading policy. So we're adding that to the agenda. So I wanted to make
Highlight
the
that.
public aware of that.
Okay, great. Then I think we are ready to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? I'll look at 9:03.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.